Welcome to Responsible Chicken Breeding. My name's Karen, and I'm here with, well, nobody, because Jim is in a plane right now on his way to Cameroon, Africa. So I did manage to hold him still earlier this week, though, and get him down to recording our stuff. So we do have a show for you today, and let's go ahead and get it started.
Hey, Karen.
Hey, what are we doing today?
I'm good, but as all of our lovely followers are tracking with us today and listening in on this live broadcast, I am somewhere 32, maybe 36,000 feet, either above, let's see, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm probably somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, nearing the continent of Africa as we are live today.
We should have picked an African bird to go.
Well, you know what? Believe it or not, and this is a little side dream of mine, there are no birds in Africa that we have a written standard for. So we're actually, we're navigating and pioneering new breeds of poultry in Africa, and someday we get to maybe write a standard of some of the breeds. We're going to teach responsible chicken breeding in Africa. That's why I'm headed there right now.
All right, I'll let you talk about the Cornish.
You need to go with me sometime.
No. I don't have a passport, and I don't want to get one. Yeah.
Well, you can get a passport. Have you been vaccinated?
That's personal. No.
Okay.
No,
all right.
Just teasing.
Well, listen, I am really excited. What?
I've got one scheduled.
Oh, okay. I am the breed we're going to talk about today. The Cornish is it's a bird that is very, very, it's profound, it's influential, and in many ways it's misunderstood because whenever we talk about a Cornish, people think of a Cornish cross, which there are drastic differences. And so I'm excited for us to do the breed of the week, this segment, and talking about Cornish. So jump in. Tell us a little bit about you. You've been really intrigued by a bunch of information you've been gathering as we prepare for today.
Yeah, it's got a weird start off in the APA. So.
Well, let's share some of that. Oh yeah, look at these crazy photos.
So tell us what breeds the standard says that the Cornish is made up out of.
Well, you help me because I can't remember what the A seal is in there, and these are some old historical pictures. There, you got the A seal and the Malay or Malay, as people say, and the game chicken. So there were like, what, 3 or 4 different breeds that were used to make the Cornish based on our history here.
Yeah, these are the black-breasted red gamecock, and the seal and the Malay sort of went into the original Cornishes, and then the Shamu,
yep.
Shamu Japanese, they said, was the base of the white laced red.
Yeah, white laced reds, yeah. Yeah, you're getting this.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
That's awesome.
That's a lot of upright game birds that turn into a not so upright Cornish.
Well, you actually do. You want a little bit of an upright to it. You don't want it to be completely level, but we'll talk about that as we jump in and do this, talk about the Cornish today. So, oh yeah, look at all this. Kind of walk me through what you learned in all of this.
Well, what do we say? That the Cornish was admitted in 1893. So just what's now known as the dark Cornish, right?
That's correct.
All right. So they were
1893. This would be the first printing of the 1894 APA standard.
Yep. But when you go looking for it, like I did, you're not going to even find a Cornish because that wasn't the breed name. So they
Yeah.
were called Indian Games at that point, and the variety was called Cornish.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
which is weird, but we changed that. But that's kind of the cool part of the history that we're talking about here.
yep. So 1900, by that standard, they've moved out of the class they were in and into the Oriental Games and Bantams class. And the whites have now been admitted. So that happened pretty fast.
In 1900, and it is intriguing that, well, I'm kind of giving you a little prelude here, but it jumped around probably more in different classes more than any other breeds. But let's continue.
All right. So 1905, they've changed the name of the class to just Oriental Games and Bantams. But they dropped they basically are, over time, it seems like they're dropping the game out of the Cornish.
Yeah.
That seems to be because the breed name also changed to just Indians.
Yeah.
So now they're the Cornish and White Indians.
You do still hear, and I bet our listeners are familiar with this. You'll still see like a Cornish game hen in the marketplace and stores.
Yeah.
So there's been a little bit of history. Let's hold on to the name, but anyways, that's interesting. So in 1905, then here's the picture, right?
Yeah.
See, and they have definitely developed and over the years, but you see the meat characteristics of this bird, and they are a little bit upright. You notice that? Yeah. So then what happens in 1910?
Well, some very exciting things. So now they've changed the class name again. Now the game is out of even the name of the class. And 1909, they've added the white laced reds. And with that, those birds get to have a different weight. They're a full pound lighter for all categories. For the white laced reds. And they also, in this year, they upped almost all of the breeds' weights by a half a pound. The cock stayed the same, but all the other breeds, all the other cockerel, hen, pullet, all went up a half a pound.
Yeah.
So,
all this was going on, and you and I were not even thought of.
No, that is absolutely true.
Actually, our parents, maybe our grandparents, were very, very young. But anyways, that's crazy. I'm
pretty sure my grandparents didn't really have anything to do with the history of the Cornish. Not entirely sure, but since I believe
if they did, I am honored that you were doing the Cornish, but I know they probably did. No. Neither did mine.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
And then in 1915.
Yeah, they finally found a home. The Cornish get to live in the English class now, and that's where they still are. So now they have a name, they have varieties that have stuck, and they have a class that they're in. Yeah. But they still are messing around with the weights. So last time they didn't change the cock weight, but this time they went up a full pound to 10 pounds. And the hens, they had to give them another half a pound. So I'm not really sure if they were trying to encourage people to make them bigger, or were they maybe fixing the fact that
that's
the
probably what
tended
was
to be
on.
bigger.
Weights are so incredibly important, and I have very strong feelings about the necessity of weights, and probably what was going on here is they found that the bird could be a little bigger, which would be a more productive in the sense of more meat, but it was at a level where the bird could still naturally mate and do everything that it needed to do naturally. So, matter of fact, I'm sure that, because those are the weights today, right? The 10 and a half pound, 10 and a half on the cock, 8.5 on the cockerels, and then 8. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Other than other than it took till 1938 was the first time I found that the weights have now standardized for all varieties. So the buffs were added to the standard. That's the last variety that was added. And the weights now, those poor white laced reds that used to allow to be a lot lighter, have now had to bump up a long way to get to where they've now consolidated the weights for all four varieties.
Right. Yeah. This is the first what I would call non-dual purpose breed. This is strictly a meat chicken. I mean, doesn't have any inclination of being a dual purpose breed. And I'm sure most people know that. But what I want to elaborate and give you a little bit of history on this bird is this is not a cross. This is obviously it was a cross in the beginning with those four different breeds. But now the Cornish is a bird that is it can be bred. It can naturally breed. It isn't a hybrid like a Cornish cross. So as Karen and I mentioned, that's in it's been for many years. The colors that are recognized in the American Poultry Association in the standard of perfection are dark Cornish, white Cornish, the white lace red Cornish, and the buff Cornish. So let me give you a little bit more history. As we said, this bird was originally called the Indian game. And it was actually developed about 1820 by a gentleman by the name of Walter Gilbert. And he was in England. It was developed with a superior fighting chicken was used in developing the Cornish. By the way, where I live in the Appalachians in southern West Virginia and very, very eastern Kentucky, there's still quite a bit of this interest in fighting cocks and chickens and everyone. It's outlawed, but people say, oh, it's we just breed them. But those are some of the same birds.
Can I ask, Jim? The Cornish, if you were breeding Cornish now, how much of the game is left in them? Can you raise roosters together? Do they have to be single penned? I mean, have they moved more to the domestic side now?
Yeah, way. That's a great question, Karen, but way more domesticated. And actually, you can raise multiple males together up, to a certain age. And remember, and part of our responsible chicken breeding is that I've said this, that aggressive daddies produce aggressive sons. And the same is true with Cornish. Now, obviously, large fowl, old English game chickens, the males will still fight. They're much more aggressive, but it's after all these generations, what are we into? Almost 120 years? The males are docile. They're awesome. They can have great personalities.
Thanks. So I just wondered that.
Yeah. So in the appearance, the Cornish are a very close feathered bird and very little to no down underneath the feathers. And the feathers are short and they're quite narrow. And so the size of the bird can be very, very deceptive. And the close feathers cause one to expect them to be much lighter than they really are. And as we mentioned, the weights, but the body of a Cornish is very muscular and very strong. You can see it in these pictures. They're strong in appearance, and no other poultry, is more. This is a very, very unique bird. They have wide skulls on them, and medium. Oh, just a medium length of the neck and short shanks or medium to short shanks, and their legs are set far apart. And we'll talk a little bit more at the end of some pictures here. But their bodies, if they're viewed from the top, it's so cool. They have a heart shape, both the males and the females. I remember when I was first learning how to judge, and I was hanging out with some of the very best Cornish breeders. And they would say, look down on the bird, Jim. You'll see a heart shape. It's a very, very important part of the type of the bird. Couple of things that I want you to remember about this bird, just some practical things, is due to this muscular body type that the bird has, these birds could be harvested at an early age, and when they're small and tender and flavorful, but they actually are. And I'm going to come back to this. They're a slower growing bird. As I said, we still see this name of the Cornish game hens that are in the marketplace. And but here's the thing. The problem, let me also say this. This bird we're talking about and the pictures that you're seeing is the bird that we used in the early days to develop the Cornish cross. The Cornish cross, or we refer to it as a Cornish game hen, or the hybrid, the fast growing meat bird. It actually, here's the video. That lower left hand corner these are Cornish cross, and these are birds that are a lot less able to naturally mate. Okay, but these birds, which is 99.9% of all the chicken that's consumed around the world, they started with Cornish, the APA standard breed of Cornish. And they were crossed with a white Plymouth Rock chicken. And that's the bird that we now harvest at about 6 weeks of age. So let me give you a couple other details. The Cornish have yellow skin. They lay a brown egg. And remember this, I tell people all the time, these Cornish are awesome, awesome birds. But if you wanted to start an egg producing flock, a Cornish is not what you'd want to use. They'll lay anywheres of about 60 to 70 eggs a year. That's not very many. And they like to eat. They have a pea comb. Remember I said that, there's about 9 different combs that are in the standard of perfection, and they have what we call a pea comb. Now, let me also tell you this. They are slow growing. This is one of the things that disturb the meat chicken forefathers, probably in the 30s and probably 30s, said this bird grows too slow. It grows too slow. Let's speed it up through selective breeding, right? And crossing it with that Plymouth Rock, because the original, and now, they got it down to 6 weeks. Well, the original Cornish, they're very slow growing. They need about 22 to 24 weeks before they are ready to be slaughtered. So they grow very, very slow. But that's not a bad thing. You've got to remember, we live in a fast food culture. And actually, you remember this, the longer a chicken is alive, the better it will taste. So in its original development, they were known to be slow-growing meat chickens, and they continue to be very, very famous for like an F1 cross of a meat production meat bird. Now, let me mention a couple of quick faults here. One of the faults is sometimes, especially in the exhibition world, the legs get too short. If you get too short of a leg on a Cornish, they will have a very difficult time breeding. And so the standard says that they must be medium in length as far as the leg goes. And the legs, they should be far spread apart. Where's that picture, Karen, that white lace red? Now, this is awesome. And Karen and I were talking about it before the show. If you look at that white lace red, in the upper left-hand corner here of the screen, you see her legs are far apart. That's actually when you are breeding, especially, well, on both sexes, but that female, when her legs are spread apart, that enables her to be in a strong position when not only to grow out, but when the male is mating her, she's able to keep her position and we're able to fertilize. I mean, there's to be able to be fertilized. And this gives her a position to really be strong and to be able to grow. If you put her legs too close together, it's not good.
There's a pretty big difference between width of body of those two females.
They're really, you're looking at the other, yeah. And the one in the very far left corner, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is, I'll tell you, this particular picture, this was in Australia. And when I was there, when I saw these Cornish and I saw, Red R Standard as well as the Australian poultry standard, I'm like, no way. They were awesome. They fit the standard, but this was a young flock and you can see he'd yet to done any selection. And so Karen, it's very observant of you that right, the bird with the nice spread versus the bird in the upper left-hand corner. Those are two birds that need to be selected based on width of body. And so you also want to remember, if you're a Cornish, if you want to breed Cornish, it is a chicken that if it has a crooked keel bone, you remember crooked keel bones, Karen?
I've seen one or two. Yeah.
We'll say that for another day, but Karen really we battled with some crooked keels in a couple of different breeds that we were working with in SPN. Another thing is the standard says the eye color should be pearl. Now, there's so much debate over this, and you can do some studying on it, but and the standard also tells us that the P comb should be clearly defined, and on the females, it's what did you say, Karen? We were talking about a pre-show. Is in the
early standards, it actually allowed for an irregular P comb. So later years, they took that out and specified that it should be a clear P comb. But there's still a note on the females that, although it's not a disqualification, so there's a little bit more leeway on the comb on the females, that it's a defect still. It's still to be counted down for, but
yeah. So you also, you notice, you can't see it super good. And these are two ideal, a male and a female. Male on the well, obviously the male's crowing. That really helps, doesn't it, Karen?
I did have to email Jim and say, I can't tell the boys from the girls. You need to tell me which is which. So
now it did help though when you saw the crowing male.
Yes, I was pretty confident on him. And then you told me about the lacing. But that lacing where the dark Cornish, the males don't quite have the lacing. That doesn't seem to hold true on the white laced reds. The both breed. Both.
Yeah. So and that is true. And that's why on these dark Cornish are probably the most popular color in the United States.
Really pretty.
And, it's stunning. And this particular female on the right, the one that's not crowing, she is spectacular. And her lacing is very, very distinct. And go back, those of you who have a real interest here, go back and read the color description of the dark Cornish, and you'll see what it says about the lacing. The big thing is, Karen, that I think breeders must remember more than anything else. I mean, it's all important, but the point that is often missed is that leg structure. You pointed out just how the weights have changed. Yeah. And there, it's a big bird. It's a meaty bird. It's a powerful bird. And that leg structure is one of the most important qualities to watch when you're breeding these birds.
The standard reminded me a bit how much it emphasized the keels and the legs. It reminded me a little bit of turkeys.
Yeah. Oh, it's exactly right. And the reason for that, I'm so glad you mentioned that. The reason for that, when you talk about a keel bone, that's the breastbone. You talk about the keel bone or on a Cornish or on a turkey is because it's a meat bird. If you took all the feathers off of a Cornish or all the feathers off of a turkey and you lay it on its back, the keel bone is what is most exposed. That's the first thing people look at. So we learned the value of a breastbone is that you don't want to lay out a carcass from a Cornish or from a turkey in a marketplace that has a crooked keel bone. It's just incredibly unattractive. So there's other things that play into that, but that's the big thing is the quality of the carcass when the bird is on the table.
And the legs ready. Have to support the weight.
That's exactly right. So, that's exactly right. So I love the, again, we always are promoting and discussing the silhouette, the outline. And again, this is a more current silhouette of the Cornish. If you go all the way back to the late 1800s or early 1900s, the bird still has an upright stance. You look in the current standard of perfection, the bird should not be level. When it's standing, it should be a little bit upright in its position. And so that's pretty important. So Karen, any other, you've been awesome as we've talked about this breed. You've really enjoyed the research and just kind of reading some of the history on it. And is there anything else that comes to your mind that maybe we should address for people who are a part of our show?
No, I did find it interesting that it started off having a shape standard for the males and the females. And then somewhere in the 50s, now it just says shape, male and female. And I don't know that I've seen that for any other breeds where they literally have the exact same shape standard. But
yeah, that's a great observation. I actually did not realize that until you mentioned that. So you're getting in, you're dialed into the specifics of the history of the standard of perfection. Very good. Yeah.
I admit that I've ordered 5 more used standards because I have some gaps. And
hey, listen,
I like reading them online. I want to turn the pages and see what it really says in my book. So
I have almost every single one that was published, including the very first one that has no pictures. I cherish that little standard of perfection.
Yeah, but you're not giving that up, so I have to go elsewhere.
You do. You do. Yeah. But now that I know you're interested in filling in the gaps, I'll try and do what I can to assist you.
So, all right. I think that's it.
Listen, if you're thinking about Cornish, there's we can have some fun with these. But remember, they're not an egg layer, but they're a very slow growing meat bird. So
do you see them in the shows?
Yeah, they go, you got to go to the big shows. You won't see them a lot. You'll see a ton of Cornish bantams. And where I live, there's ton of the bantams that are in the shows. But Anthony Ashley in South Carolina, and I can name, that's kind of drawing a blank on a few others, but there's some very, very good bantams, but the large fowl, they're hard to come across. And that's another reason why I say we've got to eat these birds to keep them alive. A Cornish is a meat chicken. They eat a lot of food. Yeah. So if you don't figure out and think creatively of how to get them back in the marketplace, you kind of need an endless bank account for your feed bill. But so
it's not an easy one either, is it? It takes a sort of somebody who knows what, that's not a beginner breeder.
It's not. There's definitely a great need for large fowl breeders of all colors of Cornish all across America. So we need some good people to take on these breeding projects.
All right. Well, thanks for pre-recording this for me, and I hope you have a great time in Africa and stay healthy.
All right. I'll be back on the 19th.
To Meet the Breeder. We're here with Matt Hemmer of Smoky Buttes Ranch. We're here to learn more about him and his birds.
Hi,
how you
Karen.
doing? Hey. What do you breed?
Well, I've got 5 different birds that I work with. I've got 3 breeds, salmon faverels, Welsumers, and a breed called Erminettes. And I also have 2 breed projects that I'm working with, Smoky Blues and Red Erminettes. The salmon faverels is a breed I started with right out of the gate. I found them fairly intriguing based on some of their unique features.
Here, you sent me pictures. Let me go ahead and share those so that people can see your beautiful birds. So these are the salmon faverels that you were.
Yep.
Okay.
And as you can see, they're a bird with muff and beards. They're also a feathered-footed bird, and they have an extra toe, which comes out of their Dorking origin. I was intrigued with them, based on their unique looks, and also historically, they're a meat bird. They originated from France, and in the early 1900s, were kind of the gourmet meat bird for the Paris restaurant business, and so that was really intriguing to me. My second breed is the Welsumers, and the Welsumers intrigued me based on the dark brown terracotta egg color and just that traditional kind of historic look. The Welsummer rooster was the Kellogg's Corn Flakes rooster. And that's a pretty good picture of this guy. He's pretty proud and strutting his stuff.
Looks like you might like multicolored birds.
Well, I'm drawn to the unique and the unusual. And so definitely. And, it's like there are also breeding challenges that are presented with these breeds that we can get into a little later. But I seem to enjoy a challenge. So the next breed is the Erminettes. And this is a breed that a lot of folks aren't necessarily going to be familiar with. It came into the United States in around 1900. It's a very unique colored bird that comes from a codominance. The ability to lay those black feathers over a white base is really unique in the chicken world. And these things got messed around, and people got really excited about this color pattern and crossed them with all bunch of stuff and kind of lost the basic breed. And it was thought to be extinct for about 50 years. And then a gentleman by the name of Ron Nelson found examples of this breed in Wisconsin about, 10, 12 years ago, and started to bring it back. So this is a recovery project that I've been working on for about 7 years, and has been really interesting, fun, and a rewarding project to work on.
They're gorgeous, and this isn't part of the questions that I'm supposed to be asking you, but do they breed? I mean, do all the offspring look like that, or is it more of a splash where they do a 50, 25, 25?
They breed like the blues breed. So you breed 2 speckled birds, and you get 25% solid white, 50% speckled, and 25% solid black. Now, if you breed solid white to solid black, you get 100% speckled. But I'm not to the position where I can do that yet, because we still don't really have that color pattern set. You can even see there's some variation in a couple of pullets that are in this picture. from one that has quite a bit of black in her to one that has a lot less. And there's also a little bit of red and some other things in there that the solid white birds mask that color. So I'm hoping, in a generation or two, I can do that. People like to see all those speckled birds, and they get a little frustrated when they get solid white, solid black birds out of the same hatch. So,
yeah.
And then my 2 breeding projects are both offshoots out of this erminette project. When I first started breeding these erminettes, I got these from Sandhill Preservation in Iowa, and by the time Ron had released them, a lot of stuff had got crossed in it, and so there was a blue gene that showed up in this line. And when I was trying to find appropriately colored birds, I did a lot of test matings, and one of my test matings produced a solid blue cockerel that was absolutely gorgeous. And so I stashed him away. He was too pretty to go to the freezer, and I didn't really know what to do with him. And so a year or so later, I bred him with some solid black erminette pullets. And this is that typical blue pattern where 50% of the birds are blue. You can see a splash bird up there in the top of the picture, and there's a blackbird in there. And so I'm treating this as a breed and continuing to breed them. They're fantastic egg layers. They lay a large dark brown egg and have a pretty good meat carcass, and they're really, really pretty to look at.
I was gonna say, and they're very attractive. Yep.
Yeah, and they produce it's just a beautiful multicolored flock. As you can see, I still don't have the blue set in terms of how dark or how light we need to be, and so that's still part of the process. But they are stunning birds. And then the other offshoot project is the red erminette. And while Ron Nelson was working on the original erminettes, he got the idea to create a red version, and he started that. And then, of course, he passed on abruptly, and a lot of his work kind of got interrupted. But there are a few examples of this around, and so just a year ago, I collected samples of birds from 3 different breeders, and I'm taking another recovery project on. And so this is kind of year 1 output. Obviously, they're not entirely consistent yet, but it's basically that white base bird with red flecks, red speckles over it. And so here's a couple of pullets and a young cockerel out of the first kind of go round. So this project's got a long ways to go. We're in generation 2 of what's probably a 5 or 6 or 7 generation work in process. Yeah. But yeah, good thing I'm crazy. But I just felt like, and based on what I was able to find, there was not, the genetic material, there was a lot of crossing. It's probably a good thing to resurrect this if it was going to be resurrected, because stuff was starting to fade. So
I really appreciate you sharing those pictures, because they are nice birds, and I haven't seen most of those before. So,
well, 3 of those are very unique and rare. 2 of them probably don't even qualify as breeds. So yeah, I got a pretty colorful bunch out here on the farm.
Looks like a lot of single combs going on there. Where are you located in the country?
I'm located in Lindsborg, which is a very central Kansas. All those birds are single combs, although the red erminettes, there are some rose comb birds in that population that I am going to perpetuate and keep going. It does get cold out here. We are kind of right on the edge of the Great Plains, and we get both extremes. We had that stretch of winter here that we went 13 days without it getting above freezing, and had one morning where it was 16 below. And that's tough on combs, although I keep all my breeders protected now from the cold weather. And then, of course, on the other extreme, we average 11 or 12 days a year over 100 degrees. And so
You've got it all. Yep.
my cool weather breeds like salmon Faverolles really don't like that, and they pretty much quit laying when it hits about 90. So all these birds out here are tested for both extremes. They have to be pretty tough to get through this.
How I heard of 7 years in there. How long have you been breeding?
7 years is probably a good. I bought my first chickens in 2012 and started playing with them, I guess. I wouldn't call it breeding, although I might have thought it was breeding. As it turned out, I was mostly goofing around. But I probably got serious and got some instruction starting in and around 2014.
So yeah, but it's 2021 now, so
7 years.
It's been a while.
It feels longer than that for some reason, but
what made you start breeding chickens? And
well, like I said, in 2012, I got this idea that it would be really cool to kind of start a sustainable kind of chicken hobby operation, with the idea that I would be raising my own eggs and some really good meat. And that was kind of my entree into this. I decided to become a breeder after I raised out my first batch of hatchery stock and realized this is not good heritage chicken meat. This is not what was described. When you look at breed standards and some of the historic production qualities, and I was really disappointed. The first time I took the feathers off one of my well-summer cockerels, I thought I'd cleaned a roadrunner rather than the plump chicken that they described in the hatchery catalog. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to. I got a lot to learn. And so that's when I decided to take the plunge. And
that feels very familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you must like it because you're still doing it. So is it rewarding? What's your favorite part?
It's a disease. And there's no cure that I know of. And so
I don't know. I think a lot of people drop out. I think there's quite a few people who think they're going to breed, and then they're nowhere to be seen in 3 or 4 years. So I think
you are right.
It's got to catch something in you, I think.
It's got to be rooted deep enough that you can withstand some adversity, because things aren't always going to go the way you planned, and predators or disease or things can come, and dead birds break your heart. We've all experienced it. And so, there's a certain amount of resilience that you got to be willing to kind of endure to do this, because you can show good progress and then you feel like you're going backwards and you think you got this figured out, and then you do something really dumb and wonder, I can't fire myself, but I certainly deserve it. And so, yeah, it's got its ups and downs, but I really, hatch days are amazing.
Most of them anyway. Yeah.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, not that there aren't disappointments there too, but just the anticipation of baby chicks hatching and, getting them started on their journey is one of the rewarding kind of things about breeding. And, kind of the next thing is, and we'll get into this, but getting the birds up on the selection table in my case, it's at 16 weeks, and it's kind of that culmination of a year's worth of work and what have we accomplished? And of course, it's not always positive. Some of those times are disappointing, but again, it's the anticipation of, okay, this is the output of this year's worth of planning and work, and oftentimes, and fortunately more times than not, there's some really good news that comes with that, and some you you see a bird and you're just like, oh wow, that's what I've been shooting for. And so, and I also just get a lot of satisfaction from walking through my pens and watching these birds. Most of these breeds now, after the Faverells and the Wells Summers and the Erminettes have all been I'm about 7 years into these things. And so they're to a point where I'm proud of them. And
that's a good place to be.
I mean, they're not finished.
Yeah.
They're not perfect, but boy, and they're not all, they're not clones of one another. So, but there's birds in there that I walk by and are just like, oh, wow, I did that.
Well, and
that's pretty rewarding.
I think everybody would say a genuine love of the birds themselves is really crucial to put in the work, in order to motivate you to. So enjoying them, being able to go out and actually enjoy them is good to reap the rewards. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing what the plan is, and knowing what, that bird's supposed to look like, and then actually seeing it, you're just like, oh, okay, this is working.
I heard you say 7 years ago you got a little help and got a little bit more serious. Was there any breeder or mentor that helped along the way?
I've had two mentors that or two people that I really consider integral to my kind of education. And 7 years ago, I was introduced to Jim Adkins, and
I've heard of him.
You've heard of that guy?
I've
Yeah,
heard of him.
He's a little crazy, but it's chicken crazy, and so we fit. We hit it off, and one of my first kind of breeder exercises was joining him for a 40-hour chicken school, and I learned a ton, just the fundamentals of breeding, and I was ready. I had birds on the property. I was already fooling around with 2 breeds and soon to add a 3rd, and so I was breaking most of the rules by starting too fast anyway. But he was a great help in terms of getting me off the ground and turning this from kind of me, groping around in the dark to actually having a plan and a basic understanding of what I was trying to accomplish. And then my second mentor is Kurt Burrows, and Kurt is a breeder from Iowa who had an integral role in kind of rejuvenating the Iowa Blue breed. And Kurt's strength really is a incredible understanding of poultry genetics. And my Erminette project in particular, with the complication of that color and things of that, and kind of building a breed from the ground up, he has been a really integral component of kind of the next level of my education. And I'm more mechanical, and I can hatch chicks and raise them out and do selection kind of based on data and such, and some of that understanding of the intricacies of genetics is not necessarily my strong suit. And Kurt's been a lot of help to me and an enthusiastic supporter. And he also raises Erminettes, so he's kind of switched gears from the Iowa Blues to the Erminettes. So him and I have been really working hand in hand, kind of building this breed back. So those are the two folks that have really had a lot of, influence in my.
I was lucky enough for one call with Kurt so far to discuss the ins and outs of feather quality with my Rhode Island Reds. That just a major difference in feather quality between my Australorps and my Rhode Island Reds that he helped me understand a little better. So that was nice.
I get on the phone with Kurt and it's an hour.
That's okay.
We get talking birds and yeah.
So it sounds like you're pretty serious about this. I mean, you're not a casual hobbyist, are you, at this point?
I consider it a serious hobby.
Okay.
It's still a hobby. It's not a business for me. A lot of the things I undertake they don't make financial sense. So it's not a business, but I do take it seriously. I take heritage poultry seriously. I think it's a resource that needs to be preserved, and in order to be preserved, it's got to be, kind of built back, and it is part of our history, and it's an integral part. And these, done the right way, these birds are productive and gorgeous, and are interesting. And so it's part of how I'm wired. My wife is like, "You started this. I thought you were talking about just having a few chickens around the house." And I'm like, "Well, maybe I thought of that too, but it's evolved,
Become more important than just the minutes,
yeah, and it's well, and I have to have a purpose." And so once I got the bug, I just felt like I had to. It's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it well, and if I'm going to do it well, I have to learn what I'm doing. And so, I spend a lot of time, building a hatch plan every year, and working through kind of my breeding goals and kind of organizing, what the year is going to look like. And I enjoy all of it and try to do, the best that I can.
Well, I'm afraid to even ask this, but is there any breeds that you think you might want to get into still?
Since I'm working with,
not listening. Yeah,
you're right. Since I'm working with 5 already, you kind of might have a sense of this question. It's most of them. One that's really caught my eye is the French Bresse. It's another meat bird. It's a solid white bird. That's the current rage in Paris, France, is the meat bird. It's a white bird with blue legs, and it's supposed to be an incredible meat bird. But I don't have room. I've got 5 projects going on, and so in order to add anything, I got to subtract something, and that has been really difficult for me. But I really like these birds, and probably my number one intrigue, I guess, is I consider heritage chicken meat to be gourmet quality and outstanding. And so, my Welsh Summers are kind of an egg first breed, but everything else I'm breeding is either meat first or really balanced dual purpose. And all those birds are I don't know, heritage chicken is phenomenal, and I love it, and I just think it's comparable to a good steak in terms of my palate and things that I enjoy to eat. So just about any one of these birds that's rare, unique, endangered, and tastes good
and edible. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What clubs do you belong to? Are you big in joining?
I'm not a big joiner.
Okay.
But
I'm a big joiner. I'll admit it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I am active with the American Pasture Poultry Producers Group, the name that's hard to say, the APAPA.
Yeah.
And obviously you and I are helping produce some webinars through them, and just it's the idea of teaching folks about heritage poultry and breeding to kind of perpetuate the whole this fancy, I guess you would call it. But while I work with them, I'm also a member of the APA. God, now I'm going to stumble through this. The APA. I'm a member of a Faverell's Breed Club. I'm a member of the Wellsummer Breed Club. I am a member or a participant with the SPPA, the Society for the Perpetuation of Poultry Antiquities.
Poultry, something close, not
our preservation of poultry antiquities. Yeah. And then, then I definitely am a supporter of the Livestock Conservancy. Yeah. And so the APAPA, whatever you want to say that, I'm active with the rest of those organizations I support, but I'm not necessarily an active member within those groups.
Yeah, I can say basically the same, although I am not a member of the Faverell Club.
Right. No need for you to be a member.
Added Rhode Island Red Club, and yeah, you're looking the same. So based on the groups that you're a part of, I have a feeling that you consider production qualities to be important in your birds.
It's back to that whole, my love of history and kind of why were these birds created? Why were they important? Why were they significant back in the day? And a lot of that is the production. And so it never really appealed to me to raise, and I have nothing against people that raise birds to show, but that did not, having the prettiest bird in the pen or whatever. I don't want to denigrate what they do. But yeah, production qualities, it's kind of back to my roots on the farm and, being out on the farm back in the day with my grandfather. And it's like, I love the concept that they have to earn their keep.
So on your breeds that are in the APA standard, you are breeding to the standard, right? So you're looking for a productive bird by using the standard, right? You don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like you can have a productive bird or you can have a bird bred to the standard. Can you do both?
I think, well, a lot of the historic breeds that were, breeds considered heritage most of them were introduced into the standard back while they were still productive birds. And I think the bird described in the standard for the most part is a productive bird. And I've also believe in understanding the history of the birds. And when you go back to the histories, you get a lot of that production information is kind of what that bird was capable when it was being employed on the farm every day to do that. Now, there are some show components to the standard, and so both of the birds that I selected, my Faverells and the Wellsummers, are considered dual-bred birds. The standard is written in such a manner that you can't get appropriate color of both males and females out of the same breeding pen, and I frankly consider that a flaw in the standard of those birds. And so I have to make a decision as to which direction I'm going to go, whether I'm going to breed towards have a male line or a female line. And in both cases, I've opted to lean in the direction of the female lines and breeding females. Part of it is just, I think it's easier. But anyway, I can get the production quality out of them via the standard. And then I tend to breed towards producing females that look closest to the standards more so than males that look closest to the standards. But in both cases, I tread that line a little bit.
With all your breeds and all your projects, you must have a lot of space. So how many breeders of each do you keep, roughly? Not exact numbers, because you don't want to tell your wife exact numbers. So yeah.
Right. I try to keep around 25 breeding females per breed. And so that's 2 substantial breeding pens. With the case of the Erminettes, I'm up to 4 breeding pens. So I've got probably closer to 75 adult breeders, plus males in each breed. But I think you got to have enough to produce enough eggs to make, it's just breeding is about numbers in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, I'm ready to ask how many chicks you must hatch out of each breed each year, because I'm from your numbers, I'm thinking it's pretty high. Yeah.
I try to hatch out 200 chicks per breed. To me, that gives me that, I'm seeing 100 pullets and 100 cockerels roughly. And so that pullet class, I'm looking at the top 10 or 12 out of that 100. And with the boys, I'm looking at the top 3 or 4 out of that 100. And so, and if you take 200 times 5, you end up with around 1,000 chicks, which is a little crazy. Admittedly, last year I hatched 2,300 chicks. Approximately 1,100 of those were my groups of 200s that I used for my own breeding, and then the balance were basically chicks that I sold.
Sometime, not this time, but you're going to have to come back and talk to us about how do you even raise that many and
Sure.
select and because it all happens around the same time. Do you do multiple little batches? Do you do you try? So I don't want to talk about it now because
I will say it's part of the reason why I have those large numbers, so I can hatch decent sized batches. And then also a lot of my breeds are fairly similar in kind of type. And so I can raise them together and slaughter, take them to the slaughter, have numbers that the slaughterhouse is interested in dealing with. And so, but yeah. Topic for another day.
And then a lot of freezers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that many to select from, with that many offspring each year, you must have been able to you've made some improvements, right? Over your years.
I hope so. I mean, but yeah, when you're starting with largely hatchery stock, you're not necessarily starting at a great baseline. If I'd have probably, there are breeders out there that I could have bought chicks from and maybe got a better jump start. But I really feel like, in this 7 year, it probably took 3 or 4 years with my salmon Faverolles to get a bird that matured to a marketable meat carcass, I guess, or something that, from those first birds that I got to actually having something that you could hold in your hand and go, this looks like something that someone would buy. This looks like something that I could feed my family and feel good about. And so, that was real progress. Trying to get those birds, they top out. Actually, historically, they supposedly laid 215 eggs a year, but not in Kansas because they take the summers off from laying. And so my birds have topped out about 160 eggs a year. But I do feel like in a northern climate, kind of the northern third of the United States, I think they could my birds have the potential to get from 180 to 200 kind of genetically. And so, those are big steps up from where I started. My well summers, again, they're better adapted to the heat, and so they don't quit quite as easily. But I'm well over 200 eggs a year with my well summers in their first, their pullet year, and I've had pens go as high as 250. But I think, again, some of that's environmental. You got to get the right weather for them to do that. You need a really mild summer and such. But, so there's some variation there. But raising a bird that looks like a well summer and acts like a well summer and lays 200 plus really dark brown eggs a season I consider that a worthy accomplishment. And they forage great. They're not a meat carcass, or they're not a meat first bird, but at 20 to 22 weeks, they are ready for the freezer as well, if you so desire.
Well, and you're approaching with those numbers in your egg production, you're approaching being financially viable for a small farm or a sustainable farm to be able to use versus a sex link, or what I mean? Like you're approaching production numbers that
you are, especially when okay, if you're trying to make a business that was strictly egg laying, you're probably gonna fall short. But when you factor in, the idea that your young males are a good quality meat bird, and because you're raising a specific breed and maybe one that's interesting to others, there's an opportunity to sell baby chicks this time of year. And when you can convert that $5 a dozen eggs into 7 or 8 $5 chicks, that changes your financial dynamics significantly. So and there is an opportunity there.
And on the APA, the other APA, groups, they talk about, one one blue egg, one green egg, one dark speckled egg can sometimes raise the price of that dozen a little bit. So if you can have an attractive egg that's a pull that maybe you don't do all well summers, but if you do, you add that to their group for selling. Yeah.
Back to your question about other breeds.
Yeah.
Breeding actually Americanas, or one of the colored egg layers, and adding them to that. When I put together a dozen eggs, I've got the dark well summer eggs, I've got the light Favorel eggs, and it is a pretty attractive contrast in a package of a dozen eggs, and I do feel like it helps. I'm obviously missing blue or green eggs from that package, but if I was really going to run an egg-based business, I might have to add a blue egg layer to the mix to do that. So yeah, I understand completely what you're saying.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you this last question, and I'm going to let you get back to it because I'm guessing your days are pretty full. Do you have a specific breed that you're really looking to improve in a specific way? Just what do you want to tell us about your goals here?
Let's call it the most important work to me that I'm doing is the work with the erminet, the restoration of this kind of long extinct, never really established as a breed. The erminet was never in the standard, but there are a lot of examples of it historically. And so taking that kind of lost genetic pool and turning it into a viable population, a productive animal in its own right. These birds are incredible layers, and they actually, they fatten out to where the males are ready for the freezer at 16 weeks, and so they really have the homestead dual purpose function.
I bring them back on. They're so pretty.
Yeah. kind of nailed. And so taking these birds, kind of to potentially breed status, we haven't decided that that's really where we're going, but if there's enough interest, we would certainly be willing to. And then kind of, we've just refining this bird, and we've got to get this color pattern kind of set. One of the things we're working on as a breeding goal right now, and you can see it very well in that cockerel, is he's pretty upright. And so we've got birds that are pretty upright in this group, that carriage, and you see the slope on the breast and the slope on the back. And we've got birds like this pullet in front of us that are pretty level. And so, we're still, in terms of breeding goals, we're still trying to refine that and get that type set in terms of a body type. And then, really dial in this color, because there's a lot of variation. You can still see that in the pullet in the front of the picture has a lot of black, and probably a little too much for the standard we're working towards right now. And then the pullet behind her probably doesn't have enough, and it's not uniform enough. So there's a lot of things going on with that breed. My typical approach with my well summers and Faverolles was to really work on, the building the barn and worry about color later. But with these birds, they're kind of part of their uniqueness is they're color based. And so you can't lose track of the color while you build the frame, because you may never get it back. And you can't just go to another erminet breeder and go buy some outcross candidates, because they don't exist. So we've really had to work to kind of retain this color and kind of build the body on these birds appropriately. And so it's been my biggest challenge and probably my most rewarding challenge. And it's one of those things that I keep thinking I've been 2 generations away for a couple of years now and thinking things are going to get close, but Kurt keeps dreaming up things we need to work on. So
that's helpful. No.
But in the meantime, they're unique and interesting, and people want them. And so it's, I have a lot of interest and a lot of orders, in terms of selling chicks, because they're a gorgeous breed, and people really like them. And so it's been a really fun, rewarding project that I've
And we had a question on one of our previous episodes about how do you breed a breed that isn't in the standard or doesn't have a standard, and it sounds like you guys tackled it by writing one or working on but having a
Exactly.
concrete goal. I mean, like you're not just every bird is great and I love them all, so.
In breeding these birds, there's probably a half a dozen random directions we could have went. One of the reasons I've got that dark speckled bird is I actually find it a little more eye appealing than what the original standard was. And I've got a few too many of them because my personal preference has selected in that direction. And I need to back out of that. So we sat down and I drafted a standard, based on what I felt like the bird should look like. And I went through I went through the standard and adapted the format and kind of picked what how this bird, part of it is the bird will take you in a natural direction, but at some point you got to kind of steer it as well. And so it's still a work in process, but we're trying to get things narrowed down. But obviously there's a color pattern there that's important to get nailed down, and then that carriage and that body type is still things we're working on. So, but there is a draft standard, that we're both working off of, and we argue about it and kind of debate back and forth where these things should go or where they should be. And Kurt's a great one for finding old pictures of these birds in the archives and going, well, here's what they looked like in 1915. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, but how many of those old pictures agree on exactly how they look like? But
they don't agree. That's one of the intriguing parts of the history of this bird. But because the cool thing about this bird, and it's really tempting with this co-dominant color, and one of the reasons why it never established as a breed is everybody wandered off and created Erminette Wyandottes and Erminette Rocks, and even now, one of my local guys crossed an Erminette, or I bought some Erminette pullets and crossed it with a salmon Faverolles rooster and created some Erminette Faverolles pullets that were stunning.
So that's part of the problem, is because that makes such an attractive bird, it makes people want to play with it instead of try to keep it.
Yeah, and so that's a temptation that I've had to resist in kind of carrying through this and not kind of drifting off course. And so
that's true. You have been rather like, you have all your different breeds and you have a lot of them, but you're not out there making summer Faverolles. And I mean, when you have multiple breeds, it's always, it's hard to, resist sometimes making farm birds. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of boutique kind of breeds out there, or what you call breeds. And so, yeah, it's a little tough being disciplined. There's time for that later, but I got to get these things set to where, and we got to get them established around the country.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not
constantly recruiting.
You're looking for more breeders to join you if they're serious about.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. You hear that, everybody? And the name of your ranch, let's put that back up so everybody knows. That is the Smoky Buttes Ranch. And you do have a website,
Kansas.
Right? And you do have a website.
I have a website that is smokybuttesranch.com, just the way it's spelled on the logo.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming and talking to me for so long.
It was a lot of fun, Karen. Anytime.
All right. Thanks. And I'm muted. In case you can't guess, that was Matt, and he was pre-recorded. He is serious about anybody who isn't already overwhelmed with too many breeds of your own. But if anybody wants to help out with the Erminette project, they are looking for responsible help. The Meet the Breeder segment is something that you can apply for on your website. Matt was our let me put Jim back up on there so I don't feel so lonely. On our website, you can apply to be. We are pre-recording most of them, unless I know you really well, just in case. We want to be able to edit if needed. And you do get questions ahead of time that you can choose from which ones you want to answer. So don't think that everybody has to answer all those ones that Matt did. We'll probably do a few less next time because I learned my lesson there. But in answer to, I want to bring up Nancy's question here. So she wants to know what are some of the common defects you see in the well summers, and that is something we always want to cover with our breed of the week. And Matt has actually agreed to come back next Monday and talk about the well summers specifically. So he'll be doing the breed of the week next week, and we're going to do our first mailbag segment. We have a mailbag question about carcass weight versus live bird weight. And Brant Bullock is actually going to come on and answer that with a field trial he did back in 2015. So in order to make up for having one host this week, we're going to have 3 people here for all of the live show next week. So I appreciate y'all coming and sticking with us through this slightly different episode. And I hope we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. See, I got to take this off. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.